Thank you. Hello, I'm George Monger, Democratic nominee for County Commission District 13. Should I share a bit about?
Yeah, sure.
Absolutely.
So kind of my background, a lifelong Memphian, born and raised here. Went to the University of Memphis, graduated with my degree in economics. Spent a lot of time in the nonprofit space, be it the Consortium MMT, Memphis Symphony Orchestra as Chief Operating Officer. My current role, still working to build an industry here in Memphis as it relates to arts and entertainment. What's important to me is making sure that we have a community that is livable for all, that we have access to quality education for our future. I think that that's a strategic importance as it relates to crime. I think tactically, as it relates to crime, we have to be more granular with how we're handling things, even at a high school level. For example, if we see a path and behavior early on, we have a better opportunity, I believe, to curb some of the more violent things we see over time. And I think that's takes a different approach than just a top-level view.
There are lots of ways to get involved in public issues and public policies. Why do you want to be on the county commission?
Sure. Well, I think the county commission, nearly half of its budget, the county's budget, is based on education. I think that is a critical component of practically everything that I talk about that I believe is important in our district. On the one hand, as I drive down Poplar Avenue in the evening, I see all of our Class A real estate, and I say we have to continue to develop talent to continue to fill these so that this district is a place where high skill and high income meet. But on the southern side of the community, right near the Orange Mound border, we see some real challenges ahead. And so because of that, I think that all has to do with either education for engineering or education at the basic level of K through 12. I think that this is a great way to influence that budget as well as identify new revenue streams for our county generally.
Where'd you go to school in Memphis?
I went to Overton High School and the University of Memphis.
Did that experience inform your understanding of education today and what you would hope would change?
Sure, I absolutely believe that I had I didn't graduate much more than 11 years ago from high school, and so I had a chance to see how much time was spent with tucking in shirts and not focused on the importance. I had a chance to see the disruptive students taking significant more time rather than investing in educating those who were there for education. So I do think that having a real experience with public education and recognizing the value of public education is something that plays a part for me. My son we're fortunate that he is able to go to preschool. I see a very different 4-year-old who was just accepted now into kindergarten early in Shelby County schools because of the education we were able to provide for him that I think all kids ought to have a shot at having. I see many that I've interacted with in one way or another that do not have the skill set that you need at this even kindergarten level at this point. My son's mother is a teacher. She explains the pain of trying to educate kids who are already disadvantaged the day they walk in the door.
George, what motivates you to run for public office? And I know this isn't your first foray into seeking a position for public service. So what motivates you?
Well, when I was 18 and ran for public office in 2007, what was interesting to me was there was always same face, different seat. I wanted to say, well, let me at least try to offer something different, because if everything's remained the same over the past 3 decades with swapping seats and nothing's changed, that was a concern at that time. So glad I did not win. I had no idea really what to offer as a solution with some of the challenges we were seeing and still see in city government. My next part is I'm a data guy. I looked at deep analytics. So in 2011, when I was appointed to the Shelby County Election Commission, we had 24 straight elections that were marred with error and questionable practices. I was the only person on the Election Commission in 2011 beating the drum that we needed new voter registration systems, not new voting machines, right away. I was the only voice doing that. in 2018, they are now replacing their voter registration system because it was a faulty system that had tremendous coding errors that led to approximately, I believe, of 6,000 people being eligible for purging illegally, and no one else was focused on that. And so I say, why do I kind of continue to get involved in these things? Because I see need. I saw need for a cleaner, fair election process. I see need in Shelby County as it relates to our crime rate. I don't think we can arrest our way alone. I don't think that we can wave a magic wand. I think there's a two-part approach, and I touched on that earlier with a strategic and a tactical approach in the short term and long term.
So on council, or Commissioner, what's the first thing you want to focus on? What's the biggest issue you think is that you would want to tackle?
Yep, so I think the biggest issue, and it's one of those bold ideas that I'd certainly want to explore. Obviously, we don't have a state income tax, but there has to be a way, as I kind of move around Shelby County, I've noticed more and more, luckily these folks can't vote here, Arkansas and Mississippi tags that just flood into the city. And I know occupational tax are illegal and all of these things. There has to be some enabling legislation to help drive revenues up that we can do, hopefully in proportion to reducing county property tax for those who actually are Shelby County citizens. That's one of those things that I know is a BHAG, a big goal, and that's one of those primary things. I think that ties and dovetails well with, I do believe that we have to make sure that we're spending resources in the right places countywide when we look at not just, and I know we talk pre-K all the time, I believe that's important, but across the education spectrum, are the budgets that are being passed being invested in the way that they're presented? During my time on the Election Commission, I frequently saw line items roll from what was approved to, well, I didn't spend it here, I can spend it there. Are we investing the dollars that we're supposed to in wraparound services and volunteer services? Those type of things are important to me. And then, of course, how can we get creative with county contracts and minority spends? I was looking at some of our expenses on jails. Just, this is a predominantly African-American city, and one thing that you can see throughout is there's a lot of rich food heritage here. Well, we're giving tens of millions of dollars a year to the Airmarks of the world. What are the opportunities to help with some of our local businesses to advance some of those that could very well serve in some of these sectors outside of just hosting an event or something of that nature?
Have you had a chance to look at the Shelby County budget?
I have.
Any concerns that you see in that?
The last budget certainly was concerning. I think one of the phrases that Mayor Luttrell had in the budget that, it's in the first 20, I think it was the first 25 pages, there's a section that because the jail population was shrinking and smaller reimbursements from the state, we had to cut funds from other critical parts of government to fund more into the jails. Well, something seems off to me about that. So obviously this would be a new administration, but it would be something to certainly dig deeper into to understand. And again, property tax. So digging deeper to understand where waste is, and I'll just give a typical budget example. Oh, we want to grow everything by a third this year. Well, when you start taking salaries and trying to get to a third, you start coming up with half of employees. There's no such thing as a half employee. So, but when you take these top line approaches, there typically are anomalies there. So now what I've done is I've had inquired on how to get the actual non-PDF of the budget. I hadn't gotten a response back, so I can't tell you exactly where opportunities are, but what I'd like to do is see a 3-year analysis map through the last 3 budgets and see where we see, kind of using spark lines, where we're seeing significant changes, and then dig deeper into those and have those directors and leaders explain where those particular challenges or why those things exist.
Do you think we've gotten creative enough with our economic development toolkit we're using a lot of TIFs and a lot of pilots. Are
Right.
there other ways to do this?
Well, I think that those are absolutely important. I think that we have to incentivize folks. But what I do think, just, you know, because I hear and I talk to folks all the time that say, oh, we're just giving money away. I think we've got to make sure that the community understands what a pilot does, and that it's not actually a cash giveaway. I can speak from my own experience that you acquire an asset or a property, you're a startup business, you're $15,000 in taxes, and it goes up to $95,000 after you put $4 or $5 million into it, and somehow that means that you're a healthy business. No, it means that you capitalized a facility and are now trying to get to profitability. But so many times it appears that it's a giveaway more so than an incentive to invest. And so do we have all of the tools in the toolkit? I think we have best we can at this point to attract, but then it ultimately comes down to what is the livability of the community and the talent base. And that's where we have to keep getting back to education and investing in the talent base that doesn't have to leave Memphis to get a quality job. Just want to share for those that are watching this video. When I decided to run, I went to oneandone.com to buy the domain name, and the lady calls and she said, well, we go through what mongerformemphis.com was about, and she ultimately asked, what is this? And I said, I'm running for county commission. She said, I love Memphis, but I had to leave Memphis just to get a job here in a call center. When you hear someone, and her sticky note is still on my desk, because that to me was one of the key items that I felt we would have to address, is how do we make sure we retain talent once we educate talent, so that they're not leaving and having to find somewhere else to go. I think that it's a real challenge every time a great opportunity comes about. Amazon, what if we had? Well, why don't you get in position to have it for when the opportunity's there?
District 13 is a really interesting district. It's East Memphis Poplar Corridor,
right,
parts of Orange Mound.
Right.
It's quite a mix. When you are out there campaigning, what do you hear? What are people saying are some of the concerns that they have in District 13?
Sure. Well, one thing is we hear typically the same thing, and that's why the message it doesn't change if this is a more conservative precinct or more liberal precinct or a low voting precinct. We don't change the message, and the reason I feel that's important is because through the petitioning phase, the conversations were all the same. The conversations were, how do we make sure that the overall community continues to grow? How do we make sure we keep the community safe? I absolutely think we have to invest in educating our people, and if we can do that, we believe it leads to continued economic growth or opportunity. That has been from 5801 and 04 near Orange Mound to 8107, which is right at Kirby and Poplar area, to 6600 near Christian Brothers High School. That's been the same message across the board. Some folks, we have different philosophy on how to get there, but the fact is our messages remain the same, because no one wants to see a kid murdered on television. No one wants to deal with a robbery or break-in during the holiday season or any time. That's universal. Everyone wants to see our next generations have the best chance at success, and so we haven't found anyone who said, no, I want something extraordinarily different than any other constituent in District 13.
Let me flip that question a little bit and ask you, as you've campaigned both for the primary and now for the general,
right,
what are you discovering about yourself through campaigning? What are you discovering about you?
Well, you know, that I think the biggest takeaway is that I have to move away from data. Again, I'm a data person, so I'm looking down in precincts, and sometimes when you're seeing a district that you say, oh, I shouldn't even go there, it's a 3-to-1, you know, Republican Democrat district, and you get on the ground and you start talking to folks, again, you start to realize they want the same thing you do. So that's been certainly an eye-opening experience for me in both the general and primary.
So tell me a story about something that happened that made you want to become involved in public office. Even it can be from the time you were,
Sure.
when you decided to run 18,
Sure.
at age 18, and you're happy you didn't do it. But what's made you stay with it?
Well, whether I'm elected or not, I'm going to do everything I can to see this as a better community. Being in the entertainment space, have traveled quite a bit. I can be on either coast, but I choose to be here. I think the last thing that I experienced was around the holiday season. One of my automobiles was outside, had a garage door opener in it. Hear glass break, hear garage coming up. Now, I'm a Second Amendment loving Democrat, so you know. But in that moment, I was thinking, how silly, what can I do really to encourage someone to, you know, you steal a Victoria's Secret bag, you know, $30. Would you risk your life over $30? That chill moment, because when lights start coming on, you start running. But these are high-powered weapons. You know, for me, it was what could be different for those three individuals.
Yeah.
If you had a $25 an hour job, would you risk your life for 30? And that continued to stick with me. And so that's why, again, it goes back to, you know, in Los Angeles, it was always said, nothing stops a bullet like a job, right?
Yeah.
So then I said, okay, what about economic development? What could I do? I've had a chance to launch nonprofits and get them very stable before moving on to next, launching and working in new businesses now, to grow industry here and having some tremendous success that we'll be announcing in the next, 30 days or so. What if I can do that in the business and through public service? Again, this is a tough district. I'm not supposed to win this district. I'm supposed to lose this district by at least a margin of 3,000 votes. Will I stop serving Shelby County? Absolutely not. And so that's kind of the story that said, okay, you got to do something about this, at least to offer yourself.
You said you could live anywhere, East Coast, West Coast, but you choose Memphis.
Right.
Why?
We're almost there. In 2013, I had a conversation with a close friend and confidant, and I said, it just feels like something's happening. I was working in downtown at the time. I said, it feels like we're on the cusp of something. Then we started to see, of course, Crosstown was underway, and then bridge lighting and all of these different things. We're trying to get it together as a community. And I had opportunities, and I see that music is a big part of what I do. Our musical history is rich. There's a community that believes that there's a next generation possible. So I wanted to do everything I can to make sure that is realized. And ultimately, why choose Memphis? It's my home. I care deeply about it. And I think it's hard to say, oh, I love my city, if I don't try to do something to make it better.
Thank you, George.
Thank you.